Astrology is a guidance discipline to trigger understanding, communication from the brain of an astrologer. Vocational profiling is exquisitely important, helping others find themselves, the most important service astrology can give another human being. Contact is more important in this process than the nature of an aspect or a sign. We really must learn about diseases and their symptoms. We have to recognize the symbology of the planets as they come down to Earth within the aging process. It is not our job to provide the answers to our questions. It is our job to use the question to stimulate protective, potentially fulfilling conversations. The impression we get from the horoscope registers within us, in our sensorium, and people feel that. Make no mistake, a matured astrology led by your brain is very powerful indeed. And perhaps our mantra should be, I want to be a good astrologer. I am a good astrologer. Give me the opportunity, world, to be a good astrologer. We've been through a lot here in this DVD series. It's enriched me to bring these thoughts to you. But I think now is a time when we should ask ourselves, what do we receive as astrologers from the astrological process? What do we gain out of it? I think the answer is that we gain knowledge of the ways of the world. People see us as knowing and wise. We become helpers because we have specialized knowledge. We take our intelligence into social circumstances of development. That's very important. We take our intelligence into social circumstances of development. We have an aura of understanding. I like that. Makes me feel good. Makes me comfortable when someone says, what do you do for a living? And I just smile gently and say, I'm an astrologer. And I'm hoping my aura does the rest. It begins with the appreciation, I think, that the soul picks its time, place, conditions to be born. What a profound thought that is. It's not original. It's profound because we have to confront it. We confront it during our lifetime to give reason for things that are occurring in our development. Why do we have such choices of how to behave? What needs do we have specifically to stay alive, to live the life given us and be fulfilled? I think we need to be in a certain time and space for development. The needs make things happen, as we know. It's certainly focused most poignantly upon the moon and its symbologies. The reality of our life experience testifies for the horoscope living within. Behavioral habits form to protect us. That's why we need our parents. I think we need our parents for 3 considerations. Number 1, of course, is nurturance. Touchy-feely, security, food on the table, roof over our heads. And if there are problems in our development with that nurturance, we're stuck there for maybe 50 years to get it right, to find that security, that trust. There are a lot of problems in that area for a lot of people. The second reason I think we need our parents is for modeling. The parents have got to show us how man relates to woman, woman to man, father to mother, mother to father, wife to husband, husband to wife. That modeling is exquisitely important, and dare I say, in many cases, exquisitely fragile. We have to be secure in what we learn from their model in order to be secure in our own life development. People think that by avoiding the issue, it is not going to cause a problem. I differ. I suggest to us that we can't avoid the need for models. The parents must guide us. I've heard countless clients say to me, I thought everybody was going through what I was going through. Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting that alcoholic parents often have alcoholic children? Isn't it interesting that children who are abused become abusers themselves? We've got to fix up nurturance, then modeling, and when those 2 dimensions in our development are secure, or at least understood, the third reason we need our parents is for contrast. We can displace the hate for our parents, if that is the case, with understanding and compassion and love over the shoulder in retrospect. That's when we are defined as an individual. This way we can appreciate what our parents went through. We can see the traffic patterns in which we got caught. This is the drama that the astrologer enacts. We are reinforced in our development by approval, and it starts in the home. It extends into the schools, to our first employment opportunities, to our community. We learn to apply the energies that are reinforced in us. And we're changed by criticism. And eventually, I think we learn to get beyond blaming others for our frustrations. It all adds up to knowing yourself, doesn't it? And this is what happens when we serve a client. We are a mirror. And I love the image of the candle in front of the mirror. After a while, we lose the source of light. It goes back and forth. This is what we're getting out of this process, this knowledge of the world. Our aura includes seeing many things in many ways. For example, there are probably 6 ways, at least, for us to see our parents, to see guidelines to understanding and appreciating our parents and our interaction with them in the horoscope. We have the sun, the masculine archetype. We have the moon, the feminine archetype. We have the 4th house, usually for the mother. The 10th house, usually for the father. We have Saturn and the phenomenology connected to it, especially in its retrograde mode. We have the nodal axis of the moon. Oh, how so powerful. These are all indications that guide us into the arenas of experience defined by the grand cross of the horoscope. 1, 7, 4, 10. And that's spills over. It's like having a row of glasses filled with water, and you just add one more drop to this, and it spills over to the next, to the next, to the next. It spills over from the angular grand cross into the fixed grand cross, based upon self-worth, giving and receiving love, respecting the ways of others and their values. Oh, that's what our aura contains. I so often have heard, and I can sense it and detect it in their eyes, when people say, oh, you're an astrologer. Yes. Their mind starts whirring like a wild bicycle wheel. And they are saying, well, he must know this about me already. It's a fascinating thought. Watch the impression you have on people. If you're conducting yourself with poise, care, calm, and you say, I am an astrologer, you're going to feel those wheels spinning. And the person is going to think, wow, he knows a lot about me already. They may resent it. They may attack. It rarely happens to me because I'm just a tall guy. But if they are going to resent it and try and attack, just quietly say, make an appointment with me. Maybe I can help. And stop talking. Make an appointment with me. Maybe I can help. And always have a business card with you. Along the way, I think our aura says we sometimes need help for difficulty. Now, we've learned about a lot of defense mechanisms, especially the grand trine, especially idealism. When we see in the horoscope a guideline that says this is a defensive cluster, There must be a reason for it being there. It's there because the person needs it. Why does the person need to be defensive? How long does being defensive last? Just think for a moment. With understanding, perhaps with the guidance of an astrologer, suddenly you can say, I don't need to have this defensive routinized behavior any further. Or maybe I only need 10% of it. And what happens is the routine is broken and fresh energies can come in an open window. It's a marvelous feeling. Think in your own life when you've made adjustments to your behavior and actually said, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to behave that way anymore. After a while, defenses are no longer necessary, and that suggests an inner strength through understanding. This is what the matured astrologer has in her or his aura. We also have a brain. And I think that is very, very important because it's too easy to take the dogma of measurements and wrap it all up in spaghetti swirls of chaos. How many astrologers do you know who spend their whole life accumulating measurements instead of understanding the ways of living? Astrology is a guidance discipline to trigger understanding, communication from the brain of an astrologer. What a nice thought. What are you going to do today, dear, at work? I'm going to use my brain. I'm going to think on behalf of someone else. We're loaded in our brain with an enormous store of snapshot references. Like a lot of cameras have gone off. And they're all stored up here somewhere. Just think, when someone walks into the room, what happens in your awareness of that person? You don't measure the distance from the sphenoidal air sinus duct across the cranium to the nasal cavity. You don't need that kind of a measurement. You sense their needs. You get an overall impression. Body language is conspicuously important. Much more important even than words. The impression we get from people, from the horoscope, registers within us in our sensorium. And people feel that. Now, you just felt it in that pause I just maneuvered. Huh? Let's not be afraid to let our brain work, please. It's doing all kinds of things automatically to tell us much. Is this person a friend or a foe? That's the primal base of what we're talking about. Is this a type of person I've seen before? Am I attracted to this person or not? Why? What do the person's mannerisms suggest about inner poise, management of developmental pressures? And fascinatingly, when we're citizens in the same culture, in the same society, we all face similar pressures. Now, I'm going to manage those pressures in a way using Capricorn energy, because my sun is in Capricorn, in order to fulfill my reigning need, which is the moon in Leo. I need to earn your appreciation of me. That's powerful. And you know what? You know who's coming to dinner. Think that way. The patterning through our behavioral traits is what we've been studying most in this DVD course. It's like the impressionistic painters. They put dots of color very near each other. And when you walk back from the canvas, the dots come together and have a vibrancy of a life of their own. This is the same thing in photography. And now with computer art, pixels, dots of color. Go back to 2,500, 3,000 years ago and look at the stone mosaics. These are little squares of color that when you pull back from them, come together. And this is what we see in our astrology. Our analyses are segments, guidelines that come together and form patterns in society and development. The point is that things come together to make a statement. It's as simple as that. And the reason astrology is sometimes difficult is because we don't use our knowledge, our brain, the snapshots of recorded individual developments. We don't use that. We look for some magic measurement. I know where the magic measurement is. It's right here, right inside me. I'm able to say I don't know. That makes my client feel very comfortable. I can lean forward and say, let me make a suggestion here. Perhaps it's a new way of looking at this situation. Ooh, the effect can be very powerful. There are certain archetypes that I love to use as examples of our art. Uranus in relationship with Mercury is going to jazz up the nervous system. Bzzz. You can't avoid that. When Uranus is related to Saturn, we're going to have a struggle between the modern and new and avant-garde and the traditional, the old, the conservative. And Uranus is always going to win. because individuation is at a premium in our socialization process in this era. Anytime you have Jupiter and Saturn together, the archetype is really one of reciprocity. Saturn is Jupiter upside down. Jupiter is Saturn upside down. Think about that. Draw it. This is a combination of law and organized opportunity, ambition, and instructive opportunity. And you have these things coming together like this, it seems to me that it establishes purpose, a sense of purpose. Say to your client, next time you have one with Jupiter and Saturn very, very strong, and in your preparation, try to divine it yourself, say, what is your purpose in life? And I'm going to tell you something. A lot of people don't know how to answer that question. A lot of people don't have a purpose, they think. But those people with Jupiter and Saturn in touch with each other strongly, they know what you're talking about. Now, is the person positioned well enough to pursue the payoff on that kind of sense of purpose? What happens when we have Venus with Pluto? I'd like to say there's a waste of emotions potentially. A waste of emotions. Pluto is the sense of perspective. It's an extreme adverb. How much? How far? How long? And when that's applied to Venus, your emotional needs are stretched out of proportions often. And society can't really manage that. Well, that's how I think. That's why you're taking this DVDs. This is why you like to talk astrology this way, is you sense the humanistic values of it. We've learned that a planet under high developmental tension by relationship with another planet that is strong and driving, like Saturn square Mercury or Venus or any other planet, really. We've learned that that brings into developmental focus the house ruled by the receiving planet. It's got difficulties. We've learned this. We've discussed it a lot. If we have Neptune square or quindicile or opposed Venus, ruler of the 2nd or the 11th, we know we have a problem within the matrix of self-worth and expecting to be loved. We're bewildered in those areas. This is a gigantic set of deductions possible through rulerships, tensions, and house references in our art. How many times have we heard as a matured astrologer from our clients saying, my gosh, it took my therapist 8 months to get to that point. And I have to add, and we've been at it for 3.5 minutes. I have psychologists and psychiatrists who come to see me themselves. And I say to them with a smile, I'm sorry, sir, but I have to point out to you that we've done this in 2.5 minutes. Okay, we can have fun about the human condition. But make no mistake, a matured astrology led by your brain is very powerful indeed. Let me tell you about an idea of thinking that is effortless and highly productive. The Germans have a great word for it. It's called Denkpause. Denken is to think. Pause is a pause. A Denkpause is a pause for thought. It's all too easy with astrology to fall into that measurement trap where you buzz around real fast and get all lost and go, oh, this and this and this and that. No, we've left that behind. All we need are a few big bells. That's all. And our own brain, our own sensorium, our own perceptions, our conversational skill. Now, I'm going to give you a few measurements, a few big bells. And I want you to let your mind take care of them. If I say to you Northern Hemisphere emphasis, you're thinking about below the horizon. And you're thinking unfinished business in the early home. A Leo ascendant, a king complex perhaps, in the midst of such difficulty. With Pluto squared the sun. Yes, there's a blanket over this person's hand grenade in personal development because of unfinished business in the home life matrix. Now you know, you understand that, and you're thinking this way, I hope, as I show you a few measurements. The moon, the reigning need, is in Taurus, and it's in the parental axis on the nodal axis. Immediately, your brain is saying mother. There's an Earth grand trine because that person needs the defenses. It's a closed circuit of practical self-sufficiency. Now, say I've just put a few little word cues down on my worksheet preparing for the consultation. It would read, unfinished business in the early home, affecting identity development, a bruised king complex or prince complex, and there's a blanket over the hand grenade, and it's all been put there somehow by a mother difficulty. Now, I'm not going to recite this to Prince Charles. I'm going to say certain key thoughts within it, and as soon as he wants to speak, I'm going to encourage it. Now let me look with you at Prince Charles's horoscope, and we'll see how illuminated it becomes. Now, here is Prince Charles' horoscope. Don't let your mind race. We're just going to look at some guidelines, and then we're prepared for a Denkpause, where we think. Notice Northern Hemisphere emphasis. Notice that the ascendant is in Leo, ruled by the sun, under high tension from Pluto. That's the blanket over the hand grenade. We can feel it pulling back. we see here that the nodal axis with the moon is in the parental axis and square to the ascendant, and we know that is mother. And so I could say to Prince Charles, after my Denkpause, I might say, wow, that'd be a great way to begin our consultation. Prince, thank you very much for coming to see me. I appreciate your faith in me and this process. We're going to have a good discussion together today. Well, yes, we will. We really will. And I say, I need to understand, please, why mother is so vitally dramatized in this horoscope in a way that holds you down. Wow. That's a sentence. And then you listen. Powerful, isn't it? There's much more, of course. He's fashioned it all into an Earth Grand Trine, a closed circuit of practical self-sufficiency. But what about this? Look at this. Mars in Sagittarius, we know, is a need in the energy modality to have one's opinions respected. Here it is with Jupiter. I know it's a little Y, but they belong together there. What is he doing with this? What about the frustrations that are going on, etc.? Let's just do one more. This horoscope has an obvious Eastern Hemisphere emphasis, defensiveness. We can't help but note that Mercury is on the Aries point, and so is Saturn, and they are square, involving the moon. So we have Mercury-Moon, which is a cerebral axis. People talk a lot when they have Mercury configured strongly with the moon. They need to talk a lot. And this is all clutched with the rigors of Saturn. That Mercury rules the fourth. We know it is a mother situation. We can see that Pluto here, that Pluto is square to the nodal axis. Mother is really a concern that is probably problematic to the mental stability of this person. This woman is highly, highly nervous about all of that. She needs to be heard. And the chances are she was beaten down and couldn't be heard. And all she needs most is peace and quiet and home security. This is Judy Garland, who ended up with alcohol and drugs, and some people say suicide, whose mother very early on fed her drugs to keep her energy up because she was a child starlet and became so famous. Now, these deductions are in your vocabulary. If you take a Denkpause, after you get orientated and make a few notes, put it away. And overnight, while you're sleeping, I assure you things will happen in your brain. You will awake in the morning, look at that horoscope, and it will be very, very clear, these connections among islands of concern. How often do we say when we're trying to solve a problem, I'm going to put that on the back burner? The back burner is where the Denkpause lives. Believe me, trust this. Because in trusting this little technique, you're trusting yourself. You're trusting the ability of your brain to understand patterns in society. believe me. And throughout this process, we should flatter ourselves that the astrologer, in the end, is more important than any measurements. In the end, you, the astrologer, are more important than any measurements. In fact, think of how much you do instinctively in social interaction every single day without one single astrological measurement. It's like sitting on the aisle in an airplane. There's a free seat next to you, and you're hoping, as people are still boarding, that no one is going to come in and sit in that seat. And you're looking at each one as they come down past you. And you're trying to say, well, no, he won't sit here, or she won't sit here, or it'd be nice if she sat here, or it'd be nice if he sat here. And you're anticipating with antennae that have nothing to do with measurements. You're not looking at their ticket. You're not talking to them. You're feeling. And these feelings become quite disciplined after a while. Now, to be most productive with our preparation astrologically for a consultation, general analysis of the natal situation requires the inclusion now of time awareness in development. I said that particularly slowly, so it is very, very clear. One measurement in time translated into a possible reality manifestation will spark anticipation of the next measurement. The next. We've talked in the preceding DVD on 2 occasions about education being interrupted, leading to a precipitous escape marriage, leading to a child probably, leading to a failure of that marriage, leading to a point where you have to start all over again because the train has not been on the right track. I mean, notice how that series within time is very well established within the socialization fabric of the way we live, our society. What if there is a tremendous activation of the 3rd house ruler, and you see by solar arc that occurs at age 5, or 3, or 9. And you ask about that time, your voice inside is saying, perhaps a brother or sister was born, and this institutes sibling tension that can become very, very important. I have clients in their 50s who are still deeply angry with a sibling that was born and took attention away from them in many different ways, way back when. It's something to bring up to stimulate the conversation. Now, I want to show you an orderly way to incorporate arcs and transits in the preparation for consultation in a mature way. Not just a whole lot of helter-skelter things written on sheets of paper and little notes and going frantic, but an orderly way. So if you'll come around here and look over my shoulder, we'll get working. In the last DVD, number 8, we talked about the vulnerability being established by a broken bone, for example, or a severe, severe bruise, setting up an invitation, an open door to arthritis later in age. It would come in that doorway because there had been an injury there. Very often we find that when the vulnerability is established and arcs and transits come in and exacerbate it in our patterning, things happen. This is the horoscope of my friend J.H. Jacobs, who has just died. Now, he was very, very ill for many years now with diabetes, adult onset diabetes. And notice where Jupiter and Venus are in conjunction. Now, what happened was, at this time, he died on July 3, 2011, the following measurements were building. Solar arc Pluto came to 17 Libra, exactly square to that Jupiter. This is diabetes. Notice that Jupiter rules the 12th. At the same time, solar arc Jupiter came to 20 Pisces, square to the ascendant, the health center. Now we have a window of opportunity for very severe debilitation established natally. It is exacerbated with the Pluto, which is the end of the line, folks. Very difficult here with Jupiter. Ruler of the ascendant, the health center, and the 12th. Now, I can't be clearer than that. When you see something like this, you have to start believing it because the probability is extremely high that dear Jage would get worse or succumb. We notice that solar arc Sun comes forward to a position opposed Neptune. We see that solar arc Moon comes to 21 Taurus, square to 21 Aquarius Mars. These are points of tension that perhaps a debilitated system cannot defend itself against. King Olaf of Norway had a severe, severe heart attack in his early 80s. He recovered. He had a robust constitution. But the door was open. And the measurements that came a little bit later, which he could have brushed off as a 35-year-old monarch, he couldn't, and he succumbed to a second heart attack. This is how you learn through observation of life occurrences. The trigger for these arcs, transiting Saturn, came exactly to the midheaven the week he died. Rest in peace, Jage. We had much fun together. Now look at the early preparation. I'm going to show you a simple preparation, and then one a little more sophisticated, and the rest is up to you. This is Pablo Picasso. Now look carefully. The young years of life are the most formative, of course, we all know that. The midheaven at 25 Aries will come to an opposition with the sun in 7 degrees. See that? 5 to finish Aries, plus 2 into Taurus, oppose sun. Midheaven equals sun. At the same time, at age 6 and 7, notice that Saturn came to Neptune. 9 Taurus to 15 Taurus. Now at age 7, Picasso began formal art training, with his father, who was a painter. He didn't particularly get along with his father, and their styles diverged quickly. Picasso became brilliant early, etc. But still, you'd have to ask about the developments of age 7. In the back of my book, Solar Arcs, and Synthesis and Counseling in Astrology, there is a 100-year ephemeris. Mine is all worn out. I have it on a special binding because I travel with it and I don't want a heavy book around. But notice how I've worn it out. Isn't that wonderful? I love it. My vibes are in here. And it tells the position of the planets Mars through Pluto on the first of every month for 100 years. You look at age 7, and then you start looking into the book for 1888, and you go further, and at age 10, you see that transiting Uranus came to the 4th cusp. That's a whole new start. He moved. Was important. I don't need to get into all those details, but he moved at age 10. So we have 7, and then we have 10, and they sort of follow one another, don't they? They do. Then we have Uranus at 17 Virgo, coming to 4 Libra at age 16, 17. At that age, a whole new start, Venus ruling the 4th. He was sent off on his own to Madrid. At the same time, transiting Saturn and Uranus were opposed Pluto. You find that from the Ephemeris book. Now, you don't have to know everything in the kitchen sink to talk about this time with your client. But it makes sense. At age 7, he says he started formal training with his father. At age 10, there was a big move in the family. At age 16 or 17, the father said, "You've got to go to Madrid, you're too talented." And so he did. And remember that when we have Uranus connected with Pluto, we have the image I have of Jesus overturning the temple tables. I mean, this is a tremendous upheaval in life. And that certainly would be being sent off on your own at age 16, 17 to the big city of Madrid. Now, what follows that? Venus comes to the 4th cusp. This is a reward time. Something very nice probably happened. And what was the good fortune, Pablo, if I may say, when you were 21? Oh, that was the first time I was published. It attracted, my drawings and pictures attracted a lot of attention. And then you see at 23, from 12 Cancer to 5 Leo, it's 23 degrees. And that led to a tremendous jump in your career, probably. Mars, ascendant, Leo, clear, when you were 23. Absolutely, I became the favorite of Gertrude Stein. And she introduced me to people in the United States, etc. Now, I can make it sound so simple. It's dynamic, but it's clear. Astrologers try too often to get all the details straight, to divine the details. I think the matured astrologer learns differently. The matured astrologer learns to have a meaningful conversation with your client, with the client, guided by these kinds of big bells. Now, our last horoscope is my horoscope. And I'm using my horoscope because I know it best. And I'm going to show you a little more advanced treatment of time within our understanding of the natal situation. Just a quick review. We see that my horoscope has a Western Hemisphere emphasis. It has a very powerful Pluto-Mercury opposition squared by Mars, which is intense perception, thought. There's a nice little mutual reception here between Uranus in Taurus and Venus in Aquarius, and exact quintile, which is told to you right here in the aspect grid, which is creativity. Now, there's a need for home security, a tremendous reigning need to be appreciated, encouraged. Overall, an arch communicator, etc., to the public. Boom. There's more, of course, but you get that feel, and you know those big bells. And you have a Denkpause overnight, for example, and in the morning you know who's come to dinner. It's all there in your brain. Now, to punctuate this, we look at a few of the arcs. We cannot miss midheaven equals Saturn. Now, I put a circle around the age number so it's not confused with degrees or anything. I know that's age 10, that's age 13, etc. At age 10, we had midheaven equals Saturn. And that Saturn is opposed natally by Neptune, so we know there's a disruption in the home, big time. At the same time, if we just look quickly, and after a while you anticipate these things and you see them instantly. It's very easy to see 0 Cancer to 10 Cancer is opposed to the Sun. So we have Aries, ascendant equals Sun. Write it down. At the same time, we look up at age 10 in our ephemeris, and we see transiting Saturn squared the Sun, Moon, and I put down the month and the year, August 46. Around that time, there was a disruption in my family that was enormous. What was this disruption in your family at age 10, perhaps around August, before you were 10, August 1946? Well, that's precisely the month that my mother and another man, who later became my stepfather, came to pick me up at summer camp and told me that my father had abandoned us and was gone. Well, how did you feel about that news? And then I would pause and I would say, fascinatingly, I didn't care. And why do you think that was? Well, I think as I look back on it now, my mother always portrayed him as not too nice a fellow. And then I would back off that as the astrologer. It seems that my client, myself, had a good enough understanding so that it wasn't in the way anymore. And I also noticed that the moon at age 10 equaled the midheaven. Notice, 3 degrees to finish Leo plus 7 into Virgo. Well, this was a very important time for your mother, not just being abandoned. And you say she was with another man when they came up to break the news and take you home. Right, he's a saint. He became my closest friend, my stepfather, a beautiful man. Do you think your mother and he were planning a marriage at that time? And I would say to you, boy, you're pretty good. They certainly were. It took them about 2 or 3 years to get around to it, but they were very happy together. 2 or 3 years later, I was 13. So my mind goes immediately here. Venus equals midheaven at 13. 6 or 7 degrees to finish Aquarius, plus 7 is 13. Did that marriage take place around 13? Yes, it did, 6 days before I was 13. Well, now you can get into this and you can start measuring all the P's and Q's and what have you. You have to do this when you're learning astrology to begin with. But after a while, you trust it. Of course it's there. Your measuring it is not going to make it more vivid. Listen to the big bells. Appreciate that the family broke up. The mother was with another man who was beautiful in your client's regard. And they got married when he was 13, when Venus equaled midheaven. Now in 1954, transiting Pluto was on the moon at the end of the year, November, December 1954. These transits are very strong. Transiting Neptune on Mars, Uranus on Pluto. I was 18. I was one of the few people accepted to Harvard in my school. And I went there, and my mother was so vividly proud because I wanted to go to a basketball school in the South where basketball meant something. But she applied to Harvard for me. I cooperated, but not much. And lo and behold, I got accepted with a scholarship. Wow. It's no wonder that was a big time in my mother's life. Notice that Uranus transit on Pluto, Uranus ruling in the 9th of higher education. When I was 21, transiting Neptune opposed Uranus, and I was bewildered about further education. By all rights, I should have stayed on and gotten a graduate degree in psychology or what have you. But I didn't. I wanted to get out and on with it. My wife went to Harvard as well, and we got married, and my first job happened to be a Neptunian job as business manager of the Houston Grand Opera Association. Now, how that happened is a long story, and we don't need it here. But the point is, I later became an opera singer, and you can talk about that at that time. Was this what led you, Mr. Till, into the opera world? Yes. So you see, it was there. In 1961, transiting Pluto came to the fourth cusp. Surely there's a move here, terribly important. Yes, I left Houston and I went to New York to study music, voice, with a spectacularly famous teacher. I thought I needed that, and I was accepted, and we changed our life yet again. And then it all paid off probably in 1964, March or April to July, transiting Uranus on the fourth cusp. We realize how hot this cusp is in this client's life. Yes, that's when I won the American opera auditions, the first audition of my life, as the best young singer in America. Wow. See how it's building? Transiting Saturn square to the Sun in 67 and early 68. Those are the times of my debut back from Italy in New York City. Jumping ahead a little bit, in 1972, I was living in Germany, doing very well as an opera singer, all over. And transiting Saturn came to square the midheaven, which is a double-body midheaven, and I'm now looking for a second career. I, the astrologer, am looking in Mr. Till's life for a second career. And I ask about it. And my client, Mr. Till, says, yes, indeed. I had been studying astrology for some time as a hobby. And I wrote a book. And that book, I sent it off, and it was accepted, and the rest is history. It goes on and on like this. I retire from the opera world after a while, after 26 years of singing, and I come to this arc, Sun and then Jupiter, equaling the midheaven. That Sun, equaling the midheaven, was 57 degrees, 57 years. Notice the 10 Capricorn, 60 would be 10 Pisces. It's 3 back, so it's 57. 57. Anytime you have Sun midheaven, that should be a glorious time. Backed up 4 years later, and with orbs and everything, it's a whole blanketed period of tremendous success. I timed the writing of Synthesis and Counseling in Astrology to come out exact to the month of Sun equals midheaven. My publisher cooperated, and we all benefited. Exciting, isn't it? Sure, there were problems when Uranus came down here as a solar arc opposed the Sun. Yes, there were tensions in my marriage. Yes. By understanding them, one can live through them and not rock the apple cart too much. And this can go on and on and on, but just think, a consultation shouldn't take longer than an hour. People can't concentrate longer than an hour and 20 minutes maximum. Eventually you can get it said in an hour, 10 minutes. I find that one of the difficulties, perhaps in my style, is that I do it too quickly. And I constantly have to slow down because I do a horoscope in 40 minutes, a full consultation. So these are the things that matured astrologers have to think about. Now I think we're timed for a few closing words, please. One little tip that I can add to all the tips I've shared with you through 9 DVDs is when you're talking with a client who's doing all the talking. And this is common. The client is nervous. The client wants his or her point of view respected, understood, and confirmed. But you've got to get a word in edgewise. And you've got to be able to tell them when to stop. You've got a plan with the arcs and the transits and the articulation of the natal predisposition. And all you have to do is gently and smilingly lift your hand. They will stop. And you say, I appreciate what you're saying. Notice those words. I appreciate what you're saying. I've heard it before. I'm familiar with the pattern. Now, and go on. Notice what I've said. I've seen it before. This builds your stature. And I'm familiar with the pattern. It's not a series of traits. It's a pattern of behavior. Your client will feel relieved. It's like when your client starts to cry. You simply say, you know, I understand that these are not tears of pain. These are tears of recognition. And in that moment, your client is no longer alone. These are very subtle, sensitive ideas, tips for the matured astrologer. Very often, especially as I get older, I'm summing up therapeutic ideas with a client by creating a mantra, something that the client can believe in deeply. Look into a mirror every morning and say, honestly and directly, 3 times over, boom, boom, boom. And something happens inside. After time, the reiteration of this mantra creates magic. And perhaps our mantra should be, I want to be a good astrologer. I am a good astrologer. Give me the opportunity, world, to be a good astrologer. And when that takes hold, I can welcome you to the circle of educated astrologers. No doubt about it. You're using your brain, you're feeling, you're knowing your patterns, and you're caring about others. Be proud. Go forth, be fruitful, and multiply.